Welcome to all of you in this video. In this video, we will talk about the Great Economic Depression. What was the Great Economic Depression? So, Great Economic Depression was an era of a lot of economic problem which started from America and slowly and gradually spread to other parts of the world. Before understanding the Great Economic Depression, we should understand what was the era of Roaring Twenties. So Roaring Twenties was a decade followed by the First World War between 1920 to 1929, when life was very happy. The factories and firms were producing a lot of stuffs which were being bought and consumed by people. People were dancing to the tune of jazz. It was an era of prosperity. It was an era of mass production and consumerism. So a new phenomenon occurred here, that was the emergence of stock market. So what was happening, that many new companies and firms were being established, and people were blindly spending money in these companies wherever they knew that there was a prospect of making profit. So people made a lot of profit and they started blindly investing in new companies. Sometimes, the prices of share was so high that that company did not worth it. So what happened then? Suddenly on 24 October 1929, which is referred as the Black Thursday, the stock prices started falling. Now they fell so much so that people started having panic, and because of this panic they started panic selling. Now what is panic selling? When you are afraid that you will lose your profits, you start selling your shares, your stocks. That is called panic selling. So people started panic selling. This panic selling, triggered, the more rapid fall of this stock market. So stock fell even more rapidly. So what happened here? Whatever was happening here in the stock market, it started affecting the banks as well. So because of this stock market, now the banking sector was being affected. How? Because majority of banks, considering the booming profits in the stock markets, had invested a lot of money in the stock markets themselves. And because people were also having a lot of profits in the stock market, they had borrowed money from the banks and had invested it in the stock market. So because of these two things, because the banks had invested a lot of money in the stock market and they had lost it, or they were losing it because of the falling stock market, and because it had lent a lot of money to the people who had invested in the stock market, the banks went bankrupt. All the banks had invested a lot of money which they were not getting back, and the people had lent a lot of money to the investors which the banks were not getting back. So because of this lot of NPA, non-performing assets, the banks went bankrupt. Now this bankruptcy of the banks affected the people, and the people's purchasing power declined. People did not have any money. People turned up in front of the banks in the long queues in the hope that they will get money. But before they could reach to the counter, the banks used to get closed by saying that they did not have money today. So in this way, people's purchasing power was severely affected and it declined. The people's purchasing power plummeted horribly. Now, when people's purchasing power plummeted horribly, they stopped, buying the goods manufactured by the factories. So the factories were hit. How the factories were hit? The factories were producing a lot of stuff, but there was no buyer for them. So the factories were hit. There were less sales and there was more production. There was no one who had the enough capacity to buy the goods any longer. So the factories were badly hit. So now what factories started doing, they started laying off. They started expelling people and their workforce in large amounts, in large numbers. So because the factories were expelling people, they were resorting to layoffs. okay, mass unemployment was generated. So see, everything is quite connected. First, there was fall of stock market because the banks had invested a lot of money in the stock market and had lent many investors. Okay, the banks went bankrupt. Okay, people turned up in front of banks in long queues, but they did not get any cash. So it, reduced the people's purchasing power, and their purchasing power declined. Okay, because people had a less purchasing power, people did not buy any goods which they were buying earlier. So this affected the factories. Now factories were producing more but without any buyers. Okay, so sales were severely hit. Now when the sales were severely hit, they resorted to mass scale layoffs. They expelled their workers in large numbers. Okay, this generated, okay, a condition of mass unemployment. Okay, the condition of unemployment was so severe that people started selling apple in the Wall Street. Apart from that, okay, people started taking the route of trains, okay, in search of jobs. Okay, sometimes they boarded the train without tickets. Okay, these people were called hobos. Okay, so hobos started roaming around the country in search of work. Okay, and the condition of hobos were not at all very good. Okay, they were surviving somehow. Some of them were dying because of hungers, because of cold. Okay, they were boarding the trains as stowaways. Okay, they did not have the money to purchase tickets, so hobos were roaming around the country. Okay, now to prevent the people from dying as wandering hobos, okay, people started preparing mulligan stew. What was mulligan stew? Okay, people were throwing anything they had, okay, which was edible, okay, in a big pot, in a big cauldron. Okay, and they were preparing the food for these hobos, and they were trying to prevent their deaths. Okay, so people used to come, whatever they used to have, okay, whatever they used to have as edible items, they used to throw up in the cauldron. Okay, and they used to prepare, okay, a food or a soup, okay, which was called the mulligan stew. So the hobos in mulligan stew were seen. Now this hunger and joblessness, okay, also touched the heart of many people. Okay, the people who were still prosperous, so they came up with the idea of soup kitchens. Okay, the idea of making soups and distributing it to the hungry people was a very good one, because the soup had the flexibility which the mulligan stew did not enjoy. Okay, how? Whenever there was a long queue, some more water was added in the soup, and it was taken care that everyone was served, every person who was hungry was served. Okay, so in this way, soup kitchens sprang up throughout America. Now, so far we have seen that how stock market affected the banks and how the bankruptcy of the banks affected the factories, and how the factories resorted to layoffs which created hobos. Okay, because of which the mulligan stew and soup kitchen sprang up. Now the next sector which was going to be affected by this crisis was the agricultural sector. Okay, so the how agricultural sector was affected. Okay, the large farmers had taken a lot of loan because it was an era of mass production. They wanted to increase their production, they wanted to buy new farm tools, they wanted to buy new tractors. Okay, so they had taken a lot of money on loan from banks. Now banks wanted those money back. Okay, now these people, the farm owners, did not have any money at that time, so they found themselves unable to repay their loans, and their farmlands were auctioned by the banks. In this way, the farmers were hugely hit and the farmlands were affected. So this was another sector which was affected by the great economic crisis. Okay, so see, okay, first of all, the stock market was affected. Okay, then the stocks started falling. Okay, they affected the banks. Okay, the banks went bankrupt. Okay, because of this, the factories were affected. Okay, they resorted to mass scale layoffs. Okay, and slowly gradually, okay, the agriculture sector was also affected. So in this way, the Great Economic Depression touched almost all the sectors of economy. Okay, now this also spread to other parts of the world. Okay, but in America, this crisis was finally averted. Okay, the crisis started, okay, showing the signs of its decline, its subsidence. Okay, by the advent of a person, that person was Franklin D. Roosevelt. Now, was Franklin D. Roosevelt? He was the president of America. He came up with a plan of RRR, that is relief, recovery, and reform. Okay, with this plan of RRR, okay, he started a lot of economic activity, okay, which was backed by the state. Okay, and slowly the market gaining the strength. Okay, and when the World War II started, again lot of manpower, lot of production was needed. And finally, okay, when America joined the World War II, okay, on 7 December 1941, 7 December 1941, okay, this crisis was completely subsided because of, you know, need of lot of manpower in production. So finally, the triple RRR, which means the Relief, Recovery, Reform Plan of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and the advent of the Second World War, saved, you know, the world and particularly America from this grave economic crisis, which is known as the Great Economic Depression. So in this video, this is it. Thank you.